So we'll start with interactions. We have myself chairing at least a portion of this meeting. Michael Keister.
John Moore, Selectman Rep.
Sandra Jones. This is my second year on the Budget Committee.
Thank you.
Michelle King. This is also my second year on the Budget Committee. Hey, everybody.
Tom LeVay.
Oops, sorry, Tom. Kelly Gordon, I'm the school board rep.
Tom LeVay, I was on it for half the year last year, so this is my second year, I guess you would say.
I'm Sean Green. This is my first year.
I'm Thomas Pitkevich. This is my first year.
I'm John Decker. This is my second year back. I was previously on like 10 years ago.
I'm Dave Rio. This is my third year.
Jim, your audio is kind of weak. Is that a Wi-Fi issue, or is that typical of Zoom meetings that you've been in before?
No, it's usually fine.
Okay.
I'm hearing him fine.
Oh yeah, okay. Maybe it's my Wi-Fi that's weak. Anyway, welcome especially to Tom and Sean and Tom LeVay coming back. Welcome as a elected member. Mm-hmm. And so with that.
And welcome to Kelly as the school board member.
And welcome to Kelly as a school board member. She showed up a couple of times last year, substituting for. Yes.
But now it's your job. Now you live here.
That's true.
Okay, like I say, I'm not proficient at hosting a meeting in this format, so we'll do our best to slap me around when I need to be slapped around, and try to make this work for everybody. I'm hoping that everybody is able to find this as close to and acceptable as an in-person meeting, but other than the drive, I think it's a lot safer, and I'm particularly concerned about that right now for personal reasons, but maybe the rest of you would prefer to come in as an in-person thing. I'm not able to do that right now. So that said, we have a quorum. I'm just going to go through the overview of the committee's role and meeting protocols, particularly for the newcomers, but as a refresher to everybody else as well. As a committee of 11 meaning 11 people that were assigned to this committee. Let's see, elected to and appointed from their various boards. I'm counting, Chris Sterndale's the extra that I was counting and thinking we should have 10 here because Lee Lederer is not. But we do have a quorum, and a quorum will consist of 6 people present at any meeting, because it needs to be one more than half of 11, regardless of who we are able to seat on the committee. For example, if we had a resignation or two, that doesn't reduce our quorum requirement, and that's been established by the municipal association's legal team that says we have to have all 6. One of the things that we've been able to maintain quite successfully for many of the recent years is conduct of meeting that includes respect and courtesy, and that extends not just among members and representatives, but also to any guests that we may have. And the chair is quite quite comfortable with muting anybody that gets out of line, and should be in person or in virtual meetings. In terms of this being a recorded meeting, as are most of our in-person meetings that we may have in conference room 1, one of the things, just a mention of personal security, is that it's not wise to divulge that you're going to be away from the next meeting because you're going out of town for 2 weeks and things like that, if we're being broadcast to the world. Possibly
Like I did last year at the first meeting.
Yeah, well, we didn't quite get to the part that said don't do that before you did that. Anyway, I've done that in the past too, before it became apparent to me that that's not a great idea. Not by that experience, but by just the potential. And anything else that you don't want spread to community beyond this committee, keep in mind that it may be spread beyond this committee by virtue of being recorded and replayed. I maintain as chair a contact info list, and typically we've had at least email names or email addresses, but it also is helpful to have phone numbers and cell phone numbers. I don't have those for a number of you. And if that's something that you particularly don't want on a list that is communicated to the other members of this committee, then that's your prerogative. You don't have to have that on the list, as the same with your physical address. But typically, I put those things on the list for those that care to share those bits of information with the committee. I don't believe that list gets published beyond the committee, so you can be comfortable that we will do our best to keep that within our own. Any questions so far? Okay, moving along to email discussion. It is not cool to have a committee discuss committee topics in an email format between us. Things that are discussed among this committee need to be discussed in a public meeting, and all of our meetings are public meetings. So, beyond just the publication of the agenda or anything that you have questions about regarding those sorts of things, typically is best to wait until we are in a public meeting, this being one of them. The community is invited to at least observe this meeting. So anybody that needs to talk with another member about committee committee dealings, please refrain from doing so.
Excuse me, Mike. How do community people join this meeting, since it's a closed Zoom meeting?
Chris mentioned that before you got in with
Okay, I'm sorry if I missed it.
So Chris, could you go over that again, please?
This isn't closed. This is an open meeting. So we've published the access information that's on the agenda. The same information that you see as part of your agenda is posted and available to the public. So anybody else could put that same information into Zoom and log in and look just like the rest of you at this point.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. We have a secretary that transcribes the meeting minutes, transcribes the discussion of what we do here on Zoom to the minutes. And she would normally be here, but she had a time conflict with this particular meeting. And she is typically at our in-person meetings when we choose to have those. That would be Lorraine Petrini, if you are familiar with who that is. She served us all of last year and I think part of the year before, but she's done a fantastic job for us. And will continue to do so for this coming year, is my understanding. RSAs. What we do here as a budget committee is governed primarily by Chapter 32 in the New Hampshire statutes. And that's accessible on the state websites. They do have, and I don't know what they're going to do this year, but in the land of COVID, but in the past the Municipal Association has held these half-day long events, typically a weekday in September, in a couple of different venues. So you have choice of one of 2 days if you're able to get away during the weekdays, to have a budget committee training session. I think it's called the Municipal Budget and Finance Workshop. And as soon as I get some information about what they're doing this year, I will pass that along. Maybe Lorraine can find that for us before I do, but it's usually posted on the Municipal Association's website, and I just haven't gone to look for it yet. But I will endeavor to do so in the next week and see if there's something there and forward that on to everybody. But that will give us, give anybody that is able to attend a pretty good overview of the laws that govern our mandate, our mission as a budget committee, and describes our lane in which we drive. But if you are just curious about what all that's about, and can find your way into RSA Chapter 32 budget law, that's a good place to start getting a preview of coming attractions. Anything else about the committee meeting protocols or general information that might be helpful to newcomers? Nobody's jumping up and down and screaming at me, so I will move right into Chris Sterndale's presentation, and maybe and John Moran is going to help him with this. I don't know. The updates on the town budget expenditures and revenues. There are a couple of documents that Chris shared with me to pass along to everyone, and I believe everybody should have received an email with those 2 attachments recently, like a couple days ago. And Chris, are you going to want to share your screen with that, or?
No, I don't need to. I can just refer to line numbers or take questions on the line numbers there if you want. I don't.
Okay, I'm going to pull up my copy then in a separate window that I can see my copy anyway. That's my plan. So go ahead, Chris.
Okay, John, do you want to do anything before I start? No, doesn't look like it.
No, go right ahead, Chris.
Okay.
I'll chime in.
All right. I didn't want to step on you, but I didn't.
No, don't you worry about that.
Okay. So we finally have a budget. Obviously, we had to wait till the end of June to get to it. What you have is expense and revenue reports as of June 30. Everything looks pretty good in the global sense. It's obviously a screwy year to get to June without a budget. We've spent through June 30 about 40% of the budget, with 50% of the year gone by. A couple big outliers there. Most notably is our asphalt projects. We're just under contract this week on those. Our road reconstruction activities for our asphalt roads, those are on line 275. You will see a budget there of 300,000 with none of it spent. That's one of the big reasons we're so far under budget. We've gone under contract for about 200,000 of that this week. There's been a whole lot of things that are different in the COVID world, but with most of our people delivering essential services, we really haven't seen dramatic changes in our either in our operations or our spending. There's all kinds of things that are slightly different, but the sum total is not dramatically different. We still have in front of us, in addition to those road projects, we have 2 more elections. The November election in particular is obviously huge and will require all kinds of new expenses. The other major items of note, we've not purchased a police cruiser as we do each year. I don't even know if we could at this point if we wanted to, but we held off on that, just with things being so uncertain and without a budget. That is in the 180s somewhere, line 192. And I don't think we're gonna do that this year. I don't think they're gonna be available, and we're gonna stretch one out an extra year and return to that next year. So other than that, we've had some reductions in expenses because of the pandemic and some increases. The increases in some cases are going to be covered by federal grants. Just this week, we submitted our first request for reimbursement for a whole bunch of things. Anything that we've purchased to incremental cleaning stuff and equipment. We bought some IT things, the Zoom subscription, things that we didn't anticipate needing, but did because of the pandemic, become eligible for reimbursement. Some of our payroll, not much, basically anything that was unbudgeted, we have a chance to get reimbursed for. That's not going to be huge money, but it will help. It'll be over the course of the year. It'll be in the tens of thousands, but not the hundreds of thousands. We haven't been through the whole process yet, so we don't know how rigorous their checking of our submissions are going to be. We're being pretty aggressive and trying to grab everything we can, but we don't know what the response is going to be yet because we just did our first submissions. And I don't think there's much else worthy of comment on the expense side. We've held back on like the social service agencies. You see those in the 300s, 309 to 325. We held off on those until we had a budget. Recreation is a little quieter. Library's quieter, so we've got some savings in those areas. On the revenue side, we were really quite worried a few months ago about a couple of line items. If you go to the revenue, what you have on the revenue is just a year-to-year comparison. About 2/3 of the way down the first page, the line that really matters to us in dollars is the motor vehicle tax line that you see. We've collected 541,000 year to date. That number has really clawed back in May and June. March and April were very low on motor vehicle registration taxes for obvious reasons. That seems to be coming back quite nicely. So we're not as worried about that as we had been. And also our larger state grants on the second page, the highway block grant and rooms and meals. I don't think we've seen anything from rooms and meals yet. Those, with the legislature having finished their session and the governor saying he's not going to touch those in an executive fashion, we have some confidence that we're going to finish the year with the state revenue sharing that had been promised to us a year ago. So those big revenue items, motor vehicle taxes and the state grants, look like they are going to finish the year close, if not on what we had anticipated. So we're feeling much better about those than we were 8 or 10 weeks ago. The select board has said that they're going to make up any revenue shortfall from our budget this year with funds from the fund balance. So we won't see any tax increase as a result of revenue shortfalls. The select board's going to have enough fund balance to work with to do that. And they've also just a day or two before town meeting, the governor gave the select board the authority to reduce the budget, the appropriations budget, if they felt so inclined. So when tax rate setting season comes around, the select board's going to have some flexibility around its use of fund balance and its setting of a lower appropriation budget. Both of those things can help offset property taxes. The board has talked amongst itself about making sure that we do what we can to ease the tax burden this year with so many people earning less or earning nothing. So that's on their mind, and they suggested some things at town meeting to that end, and also have some flexibility within the operating budget. So despite all the chaos in the world, we're feeling okay 6 months in. And I can answer any questions about any of the specific line items or the global questions, or John, do you want to add anything to any of that?
No, you pretty much explained it, and unless people have questions on it.
It looks like the interest is down a bit. I'm not sure that was, I mean, yeah, interest rates are down, so that would make sense.
Yeah, and our cash flow may be a little slower too. We could be carrying a little bit less into the year than we did a year ago for a whole host of reasons, but all three of those would move that number.
On the sale of recyclables, what's caused that number to drop?
That's a function of the changes we've made in response to the pandemic. If you're a regular user of the recycling center, you know that we are outside of we were outside the building for a few months. Operational things, plastics are just now being recycled again. Plastics is a source of revenue for us. So we didn't ship any plastics for a while. Mixing paper and cardboard reduces the income that we get from both of those. We still get to recycle them, but we will reap less. Cardboard does produce a little bit of revenue for us. Typically, paper really doesn't anymore. So those are the big factors there. We won't be able to use federal grants to offset lost revenue, only additional expense.
Thank you.
I didn't know we were recycling plastics again. So that's good news.
Yeah, just last week. Well, actually, I think 2 weeks ago we kind of did a soft reopening of it and started to publicize it last week. So we're back in the game there.
So where do we go with plastics when we bring them? That's not for this meeting, but I'm interested.
You can go back in the building. That's the product that we're taking in the building.
Okay.
Just please don't be the fifth person in the room there.
Okay.
I was there yesterday, today actually, and there was still a cone prohibiting you from going inside.
One door or two?
It was before both doors, you know.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't see anybody recycling plastic today.
All right. Well, that's news to me. I wasn't at work today. I'm gonna check on that. Certainly our intention to be taking it again.
I was there as well. I didn't go in the building for any reason, but I did notice that the attendant that normally mans the post out by the paper dumpsters was not there when I was there about, must have been about 3 o'clock. Yeah, close to 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for Chris? On either revenues or the expenses? Chris, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You gonna hang with us for a while yet, or?
I'm curious to see how the school district's gonna finish the fiscal year, so I'm gonna stick around for that, and then I'll probably evaporate. But I did make you, Michael, and John co-hosts, so I think you will be able to continue without me if and when I do drop off. But thank you all.
Okay. Just looking down the agenda to see if there's anything else that we may need your expertise on.
Do you intend to talk about the switch to SB2 tonight, or are you going to defer that to your next meeting?
There will be a report from Mr. Decker on that, I believe. I haven't told him that that's expected of him, but it is an agenda item for subcommittee reports. And
SB2?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I get my SB2s and SAUs mixed up. Okay. Never mind. No, I don't know of any agenda item for that.
Okay.
That's definitely something that we as a budget committee meeting will be impacted by. And we'll need to think about how to plan for that when we get our heads around it. I have not yet got my head around it, so I didn't put it on the agenda.
How is that going to impact us?
Timing.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. Mostly timing.
Yep. Okay, well then, if there is nothing else on the town side, let me just ask John for a quick report on the select board activities. If there's anything going on there that we need to know about as a budget committee, or just for general information to us.
Well, we're getting back into the swing of things from going from the Zoom meetings to now actually in-person meetings, which is nice. To be back in the room and talking. Again, like Chris added earlier, we just went over contracts for paving for the town, accepting the bids. We hope we got more bids, but we only got 2. So out of the, I think, 4 or 5 that we sent out, because of bigger projects, some of the companies we normally would use didn't bid in. But we're feeling confident with what we have that'll work for us for this upcoming year. And basically just general stuff, nothing, financially yet, as we will start talking about more of that, and I will bring that more to the budget committee's attention as we start to ramp up for our budget to be ready for the budget committee to review. But we've been talking a lot about the expenses, and it's good to have that report that Chris just showed, because there was a lot of talk, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, about how much of a downfall we could be seeing by revenues. And to see the number at only 40,000, you know, from what the numbers showed today, what you looked at, you know, is a good sign of relief for the town. So for the fact of not having to, you know, use a large expenditure from the fund balance, you know, because that is a safety net for the town. But, you know, we'd rather keep it as a safety net instead of expenditure, you know, spending it and only spending it when we need to. But it's just kind of in general business that's been going on, and just dealing with the COVID.
Okay, thank you, John. I guess the next thing on the list appears to be updates on the school budget expenditures and revenues. And for that, we have Kelly Gordon. Welcome, Kelly.
Well, thank you. I'm going to share my screen so I can go over this easier.
Okay, do we need to give you that permission, or have you got it already?
Looks like I have it because I was looking at the town report as he was doing it.
Okay, then.
So let me find mine. Okay, so the school budget is difficult to look at because it's so tiny and there's so many lines. So I kind of broke it out with some points that I wanted to share out, and then you guys can ask questions. These are definitely draft financials. I mean, we do have some end of year information, but it's all in draft form. Things are still encumbered for June that are working their way through. And so as of right now, we have a fund balance of $351,909.16. It's possible that 1.5% of that, or approximately $130,000, will be moved into the general fund. Just with all the different things around COVID, that might happen in order to have that in case we need it. It hasn't happened yet, but it could. And then I'll show you on the next, it's in the revenue report, that the food service costs were off because of COVID. And so we will have to cover that cost of $23,000 approximately out of that number. And that's all I know for now. Other things may happen, but that's where we are.
Kelly,
of course, yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
You said 130,000 is 1.5% of 351.
Am I wrong?
Looks a little wrong. I'm thinking that looks more like 130 or 130,000 looks more like what, a third, almost a third of that, 30%.
You're right. I'll have to relook at that because that's the number they gave me, but I know the cap is at 1.5%, so that can't be right.
I think it's 1.5% of the total
general. Yeah.
Not 1.5% of the remainder, but 1.5% of the starting appropriation number.
Which was 13 million. So that would make sense. So that's what that is. And I know that caps there, so that would be the most that we would be able to move over. We wouldn't be able to move more than that. And then our big considerations are, of course, the global pandemic and remote learning, which has had a lot of implications on a lot of different things, really. So this is our monthly revenue report. I did forward this to everybody. I have to move your faces out of here so I can see it. Just a few things on this and I'll catch up a lot of this in the actual budget, but some things to look here. We have some kindergarten aid sitting there, some catastrophic aid, which is aid from the state for special education purposes, which makes sense during this remote time that we may have gotten that. So that's revenue. And then we have some that 23,000 should be sitting here that was not from the food service right here that we'll probably have to make up. And then our expenditures, so here's the fund balance. It's a little different from the one I just gave you because the documents I emailed to you are different than the ones that I just got for my packet, but it's only off by a tiny bit. And every time we run the report, that'll get closer and closer. So the number I gave you is actually the more accurate one. And some of these lines I'm gonna go over in the actual budget, but this is all broken out by the functions, which is the easiest way to look at the school budget. So I pulled out some that are notable. I didn't think about where. This is the regular education function here. And I've highlighted some things that are, I've looked for kind of bigger things that are like 1,000 or more overspent on the budget. And so our paraprofessional, we did add another paraprofessional because we had a lot more kindergartners than we anticipated. We ended up having 4 classes of kindergartners, so we added that 4th paraprofessional job. So that has a salary, and you'll see later on benefits for that job also were unbudgeted for because we didn't know we needed the job. And then we have a tutor here that was a student need that we didn't anticipate that we needed to fund. And then just a retirement, and I think that might have been an early retirement, and it's probably wrapped around things that are going on right now, which is why we may not have anticipated all of that. So, and that we're still within budget, but we overspent those lines. And then this is continuing on that regular education. We had some social studies supplies and some general supplies that we updated for remote learning. And we actually moved some money at the very end from what would have been the fund balance to offset some of these costs. And they were things that needed to be done for teachers to be able to teach students remotely. Okay, so here's our special ed line. And in here, the paraprofessional, these costs are mostly around the paraprofessional that we had to hire for the large kindergarten class. And oh, this little bar keeps popping up, so I can't even read my own writing. Oh, so we had some extended school year needs here, and that's just, we may have at first not known that we needed the extended school year for whatever reasons, and then after the remote part, we may have opted to put some extended year services in because the students then met the recommendations for that. And then we had some special ed costs around Co-Brown. Although our Co-Brown tuition rate is still under budget, so we must have had some students moving back and forth in there, but we did have a significant cost there. We replaced and upgraded some software, technology equipment, and replacement equipment, and this again was mostly due to the remote learning that the students and the teachers needed to do, and we did offset this with some money that we approved at one of the board meetings in June. So that is encumbered now and should come out. And that was in the computer assisted instruction line, if you're following along on that really fun, really long, tiny budget. So our school board expenses, we do a school climate survey every year, and this year we had to send that out to be analyzed, so we did incur some cost around that. And our school board secretary, she worked a lot of hours, so we incurred some extra costs around that, mostly because she listens to our meetings and then has to do the notes and everything from there. And our auditors had to come out more than once to complete the audited financials from last year. So there was costs around that. And I did forward last year's audited financials. They're done and complete, and the whole report is there if you want a little light reading. It's not vastly different from what was presented last year, but it is complete. So I sent that along for you guys. The assistant principal, we upped his salary at the beginning of last year. Here's a strange one. Our telephones, we incurred a lot of cost around that because of the bandwidth. I think we had to upgrade our bandwidth, and we had a lot of we had issues with our phones. So we had to upgrade some of the actual phones and the bandwidth, and that made us over budget there. And then we also had to update a lot of computer software and get platforms for the teachers and students, such as Seesaw and those types of things, which is what that is. We have a lot of transportation costs. So during remote learning, we did honor all of our contracts. So we paid all of our bus contracts through the entire end of the year. And that was with guidance from the state that we did that. And so we did incur some costs there. These ones are around mostly special education bus costs. The big one is what we try to do is we try to meet up with other towns who have special education busing needs. And so we can share the costs of those. But we lost that sharing ability at the beginning of the year. So we ended up paying full price for some transportation and putting a monitor on that bus. So that's the big chunk of money you see there. And then these are the facility and design schematic that we had done for the addition that we hope to bring to warrant next year. And this 21,000 was actually moved from capital reserve to do some kind of work in the school. I don't know exactly what it was, but I remember when it was happening. It was vents and all kinds of stuff. So that came from our capital improvement. So those are kind of the big items. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about that.
Yeah, hi, Kelly. Did you say that you're still paying the bus drivers?
So we did. We honored all of our bus contracts for the remainder of the year.
Is that, so that's not going on still?
Well, our budget for June 30th is done. So now we're into our new school year budget, and we probably will be using our buses again.
So I have a follow on to that.
Yeah.
So if we obviously under budgeted the bus contracts, if we've overspent them and we were just honoring the contracts.
So
is there a reason for that?
Yeah, the big reason that line was overspent was a bus for special education needs, and those we tried to have a share in place so that we were sharing that cost with another district, but it ended up not working for whatever reason. I don't know if the other student moved out or why ever that would have happened. So we ended up incurring the full cost for that. And then we put a bus monitor on there. So that's where a chunk of that money got overspent.
And then you continued to pay for that even though the school was closed?
At an earlier meeting today,
wow,
that kind of explained that it was from state guidance that we did that. The idea that we were supporting the bus companies because by the time we needed them again, some bus companies may not have been able to survive financially. So everybody was encouraged to go forward with fulfilling those contracts. It wasn't a Nottingham decision.
Well, it was, our decision, but we were given guidance from the state to do that.
That decision.
Right. And there's a bus driver shortage already. We are already down one bus, and we've been down one bus for many years, and they just can't fill that position. So the logistics behind that guidance was exactly what you just said, Sandra. We didn't want to lose our bus companies completely, because then school is stopped. There's nothing we can do. So we were, as a state, given guidance to pay those contracts.
Right, but you did have a choice, and you decided to support the bus company rather than the taxpayers, which I would encourage you to have them in mind in the future.
Yes, we did have a choice. We didn't see like one over the other. We didn't choose the bus companies to hurt the taxpayers. We were going with the guidance.
Right, but it was like $238,000, wasn't it?
Can you go back to that page, Kelly, please?
Yeah, so that's right here. This is the, it's on this piece right here, our bus transportation. And so some of that, I mean, the kids rode the buses for the majority of that time.
So that's not just the coronavirus shutdown period. That's the whole.
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, the kids rode the buses for the majority of it. We just honored the entire contract. And our busing is it's expensive. We have a big town. So to get all of the kids where they need to be, we incur a lot of expense with busing. And then having our students at high schools that are not in our town also incurs busing expenses.
So what percent of this $239,000 was spent during the time when the school was shut down?
So, I mean, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I know that the school was shut down from March 13th on. So possibly a third.
Kelly, I did want to point out though that is it true that the only part of the transportation budget that was over was special ed? Because the regular transportation, that was, you're under budget by $47,000 there. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, there was a Dover bus that I think may have gone over just because of when they switched a route or something, but not by very much. Let me see if I can find that.
And I guess that's the one that concerns me more, is the Dover one, because
so
that's what I'm looking really for.
But this is in the special education function, so this also would have been a special so all of our overages are in the special education.
No, that doesn't look right. The special ed high school transportation should be that special ed one, right? And then the one above it is just regular Dover High School.
I think so. This whole piece is all
2721.
Oh yeah. So this is 2721. So you're right. This is in the other part of the budget. So this piece would have been overspent on a Dover High School bus.
And that's kind of why I was concerned, is like, okay, so what did we do wrong there to budget it? If that was the quote unquote real number based on paying the contract out.
Right. Why would we have been over? Because unlike special education, there's sometimes things we can't control. It could have been, I mean, what are the reasons that a contract goes up? Gas prices.
Kelly, was that because they didn't? Was it? I don't know which was if it was Cole Brown or Dover, but wasn't it mid-year that there were Nottingham students or parents that requested additional stops for the high school because of safety?
Yeah, and I think, but I don't know. I think we have only one Dover bus though, but I think we did pick up a second one that met. I can find an answer to that for you, absolutely. I don't have it off the top of my head.
And that's fine.
But I definitely can get that answer.
I have some questions about salaries.
Yeah.
Paralegals from March 13th on, were they being paid because they're hourly?
If we had a contract with them, then we would have paid them out. If we were paying, if we wouldn't have contracted any more services that we didn't need, but if we had already made an agreement with them, then we would have paid out the contract that we already made. Does that make sense?
Well, teacher assistants are paid by the hour.
Oh, paraprofessionals? I'm sorry. We did. So our paraprofessionals are under a collective bargaining agreement, and they did work through the remote shutdown. So they were doing their full day's worth of work, and we did pay out their contracts, yes.
As a former teacher, I'm not sure exactly what functions they would be performing in a remote setting.
Oh, that I can answer. So they were, a lot of the remote teaching was done kind of like this format. So those paraprofessionals were one-on-one with kids, and they were supporting teachers in creating asynchronous lessons. They were doing some of the, if a student had done some reading and recorded it, the paraprofessionals were doing some of the recording of that and adding to the data pool. And so they were doing a lot of their job. They were just doing it this way. So they would be one-on-one with students.
Okay.
So going forward, what kind of stuff is the school board doing to reduce spending this year?
So we actually have not started our budget planning. It will look different because we actually don't know what the school board, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys. The school board is always looking to keep our budget as small as possible. When we went through the budget we just had, every time it came back to us, we kept saying, we want it down, we want it down, we want it down. So we are always looking for ways we can make the budget leaner and still serve our community. Moving forward, we don't know what school's even going to look like. So it's hard for me to answer that right this second. Until we know.
That you're thinking of?
Always,
okay.
Always thinking of.
Because I talked to the tax collector today or yesterday, and there are well over 200 unpaid tax bills out. So I think there's maybe 2,500 households in town. So it's about 10% of people that have been unable to pay their property taxes that are past due. And so that's something to consider.
Yeah, we do keep track of that. We also keep track of unemployment. In our town, it's like 8.9% or 8.4% right now. So we understand that those situations are here in our town, and we absolutely want to do the best we can to be aware of that all the time.
Tom, that 200 number she gave you, is that 200 fresh new, or is it that same, let's say 100 people last year didn't pay their taxes, they're behind, and there's an additional 100 this year?
I think this is the ones that missed the current, the amounts didn't look big enough to be rolling. You can see what it says. Yeah, it says filtered unpaid receivables listed by warrant.
Okay.
So I don't know.
We'll look into that for my own.
They all say due date of July 7th. So.
Okay.
Kelly, I have a question about that 130,000 that we started out with up top.
Yeah.
It was my understanding that the general fund receives the entire unspent amounts at the end of when books are closed and monies are returned to the town. Am I missing something?
No, we return our fund balance. When we're getting close to the end of the year, we make some decisions with it, and we made a lot of decisions this year around COVID, and I have that information if you wanted to see it. And then we are allowed to keep that 1.5% going forward, and all the rest we are required to return to the town.
Oh, okay. I thought the 1.5 was the amount that was getting returned. Okay.
No, that's the amount that we can by statute keep out of the fund balance if we choose to. None of that decision hasn't been made, but I wanted to put it out there that it could be, which could offset the
Okay, so effectively that could be carried over from your prior budget.
Yeah. And the 23,000 for the food, because we didn't get that revenue, that we don't have a choice. We have to pay that. So that will come out of that number.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, is there any money available from the state in the form of grants or anything? I mean, I'm sure it's fairly.
Yeah. So there's what's called the CARES grant, and we did receive $23,000 from that grant. And that's when you listen, if you listened to the governor and his words on reopening, when people were asking about PPE and he said he gave grant money for that, that's the money he was talking about. So Nottingham did get $23,000 from that CARES grant that can be used for PPE or whatever things they need to put in place to keep our school safe.
So if I can just summarize, the 4 months that we were not in school, could you quantify how much money we actually saved by not being in school, if any?
So I asked that question. We did save a little on electricity. That building was open 5 to 6 days a week. There were staff members in the building. So oftentimes the secretary and our maintenance staff were in the building. So we did have to use the electricity and the heat and those kinds of things. We did have a little bit of savings there, but the building itself was closed. The teachers were still working and students were still being educated. So we still had to pay for all of those services, and to transition from the brick and mortar to the air required some kind of creative transitioning of what we had into the virtual world. So we incurred some costs there. So we didn't have a whole lot of savings because our building wasn't right. And we lost revenue on lunch, things like that.
It wasn't like school wasn't in session. School was in session just differently.
Yeah, school was definitely happening. It just wasn't in the building.
Correct.
I'm well aware of that.
Yeah. It's a misconception that sometimes is out there. And I'm also a teacher, so I sometimes get a little bit, I shouldn't worry about it, but they were doing their jobs.
Does anything else for Kelly?
Kelly, is there any indication that any parents are going to not send their kids back to school, that they like homeschooling, or that enrollment might go down?
That could happen, absolutely. So as a SAU, data was gathered around those types of things. And yes, there is indication that there are some families who are not going to send their children back to school. At the Nottingham level, we can't disaggregate that data just because it came in as an SAU. So a new survey went out just for Nottingham. So I will have that information probably at the next board meeting, and I can get that to you. I think that one of the options will probably be a remote learning option. So students may not actually unenroll. They may do school remotely while the teacher's teaching in the classroom, but none of that has been decided yet. So it's really hard for parents to even make those decisions right now. I think once there's a cut and dry, this is what Nottingham's going to do, then I think we'll have a lot more of that kind of information. When parents actually know exactly what their choices are, then I think they'll be a lot more likely to opt out or unenroll if that's their choice. So I will have that answer. It's just everything's so unsettled. I
understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question about the survey. So I got the survey in an email, and I also saw that somebody had posted the survey link on Facebook. So people on Facebook are taking the surveys who don't have children in the school system. is their data or their opinion going to be, you know, altered by that, you know?
I don't know the answer to that. I
Ask for your
don't
name.
know why someone would take the survey if they don't have.
I don't know
students in
either,
the
but I'm just
school.
saying those opinions could very well be on there. Who people who don't even have kids in the school system are taking the survey. So that's, I just thought it was kind of strange that someone would post it on the Nottingham page instead of just leaving it for parents to decide. That's all.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
What kind of stuff is on these surveys?
It's just questions like, how safe do you feel on a scale? Was it on a scale or satisfied or not satisfied? Like, how safe do you feel your kids sitting to school? You know, are they getting, do you feel like the school is supporting your child in learning? Do you feel like the teachers are supporting your child learning? I know one of them was like, how likely are you going to send your child back to school? I think there was a bunch of questions on there just to get a feeler of how the parents were feeling. I have an 8th grader who's going to be in 8th grade and then a kindergartner coming up in Nottingham. And I also have a daughter that goes to Dover High School. So it's definitely something my family's thinking about. So I just thought it was strange that that information might have been out there for people to take it who shouldn't really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for that feedback. The other thing about that is, we're budgeted for this coming school year. And I don't know how that's going to look because we don't know what the school year is going to look like, but obviously we're going to try very hard to stay in our budget. And the budgeting process for the next school year will start. We'll have a better idea about enrollment and those kinds of things definitely by when we start our budget planning, because the kids will already be in school. So we will have a much clearer picture of what we're budgeting for when we actually are knee deep in the budgeting process.
Okay.
Where is the SAU on coming up with guidelines and protocol for returning to school?
That's a really good question. The SAU has had a big task force that has been working for a while now at kind of the big picture. And then the governor came out just this week with his guidelines for reopening, which are very flexible. And now the work is moved from the SAU into the 3 districts. So at this point, the kind of nitty gritty on the ground planning is happening. So I'm assuming soon there's going to be some actual plans put in front of the board and we'll be able to have some decisions. But right now, all of that's being looked at. There's hallways are being measured and plexiglass-like material is being ordered. And they're looking at the sinks and all the things that they need to be looking at in the building. That kind of thing is happening now.
The only reason I bring that up is because to do a survey at this point without knowing that kind of information is probably not very accurate. There's a number of factors here. Teachers who have pre-existing, health problems, whether they're going to return to the classroom, depending on what they come up with, and whether students want to come back into the classroom, depending on what the the guidelines are. So until all those things, until they decide those things, it's
like chicken and egg. Everybody wants the information to make the plans, but nobody wants to give the information until they know the plans. It's and the whole thing is unprecedented. Nobody's ever done it before. So you're absolutely right. It's the information I guess any information we have helps, but it'll be more clear as what's going to happen becomes more clear. We'll definitely have better information.
This is going to sound, but the board will actually look at things in the budget where, because of the new situation, maybe expenditures that they won't be spending.
Yep.
So they can use that money to keep the school budget where it is and not at a over.
Absolutely.
Over where we're sitting. So if there's line
absolutely, we're already starting to do those things.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully, when we incur a new cost, we're always looking for where the costs are going to be less and where we may get revenue from places we're not thinking about yet. So yes, absolutely, that'll be on the plate.
Just to go back to the surveys for a second, Michelle, did you get the survey today that was emailed today?
No, the one I was talking about was Sanel. I think I got 2. But I did the second one because I figured it was the most updated one. But so I haven't gotten anything today. I can take a look.
Yeah, so Chris sent out the survey, I think that Kelly might be referring to today, that's much more specific.
Okay.
Your name, it asks for the name of your student, and it asks if you want to send your child to school, if you're comfortable with a partial day, full day, transportation. So it's much more specific. So
okay. I'll look for that.
We're looking for that more granular, like Nottingham specific level. And I think you can even say different things for your different kids.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell that.
Because it's quite possible that in one family, it would be best for a child to be in person in school and for another child, not at all so.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be special education decision.
Right. It could be, I mean, my own kids, I think that way, actually.
That's what happened with me too. The one who does better at school did way worse than the one who was struggling at school really excelled online. So it was interesting to see that too.
Yeah. So we want to leave that open for.
Well, the biggest decision that has to be made is whether they wear masks or not. I just know that from all the social forums out there and discussions and whatnot.
There's not a lot of hard and fast information about that either. And I know there's people are trying to gather research on age level and if the masks are hygienic when they're little. And there's so much work going on in that area. And I know that there are parents who will want to keep their kids home if masks are not required in the classroom, and parents who will want to keep their kids home if they are required in the classroom. So like you said, once we know what's going to be required, we'll have a much better handle on what people are going to want to do. But it wasn't a mandate in the actual
I know.
information for the governor. So people are, that's the one thing when I'm out in the community that people ask the most about. And I don't have an answer.
Kelly, I want to thank you for reminding us that you're already budgeted for this upcoming year. We tend to forget that, but yeah, that's a really important factor that your budget's already established for the next school year. Actually, we've just started it.
Yeah, and we're going to have to make it work for whatever that school year looks like, and then keep all of this in mind moving forward.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. That struck me as well. Anything else for Kelly? Other than thank you very much for a tremendously informative presentation. We're lucky to have you on the committee.
Thank you. And I will get the answers to the questions that I was not able to answer and make sure I have those for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, great. If there's nothing else there, should we move on to the subcommittee reports? We have, for those that are new to the committee, we typically have 2, 3, 4, sometimes subcommittees that other endeavors in the town ask us to be representing on their committees. So we've appointed or elected people that are representatives to these committees. And I believe Lee Lederer, who is resigning, was our representative to the CIP committee.
Yeah.
Was there an alternate?
Not yet met.
I'm sorry?
That committee has not yet met, or
Okay.
it's been formed. for this upcoming year so far.
Okay. So obviously there have not been any meetings that she needs to tell us about.
Correct.
Got it. I think there was one committee meeting during the term that she was the representative, and that was like right at the very end of our budget year that finally happened, and she was able to make her grand presentation. Another one is the school facilities committee. I was the appointed or elected member for that, and Sandra Jones was an alternate that has participated in nearly all of the meetings. We have been meeting fairly continuously through June and May and June, almost on a weekly basis sometimes. And I can go ahead and make that presentation. And the other one coming up, if John Decker wants to start thinking about it real fast, is the SAU committee that was formed by a warrant article at the March ballot meeting. Yep. And so he's been attending a few of those. I don't think they've gotten way into it, but he hopefully will have something to share for that. John, you want to take first, or do you want me to go first?
I don't care if you want me to go first. That's fine. Okay, so I volunteered for the SAU study committee. I think we've met 5 or 6 times already. We're meeting pretty much every other week. We actually just met this past Tuesday. We're making pretty good progress. There's quite a bit to do. Basically, the objective is to put together a recommendation whether or not to have a warrant article next year to put before the population to withdraw from the SAU or not. Obviously, if the recommendation is to not withdraw, we wouldn't have that warrant article. But you know, before that, we obviously have to put together a plan and present it to the state for their blessing before we can actually go to the townsfolk with that recommendation, if we decide to do that. So, you know, we're kind of looking at the data, trying to see if, you know, we're looking at costs of salaries, what the services that we need to provide are, how we could go about doing it ourselves, where would we put people if we had to do this ourselves. So there's quite a bit there. Kelly is on the school board, one of the school board reps from that. Kelly, do you have anything to add to that, or did I cover it pretty good? All right.
What this is Sean, being a new guy on here. Certainly prior to this committee, the subcommittee being formed. What are some of the drivers? Is that just a financial driver? Or what are some of the pros and cons, just in brief, in terms of withdrawing from the SAU?
So one of the drivers was that Stratford actually withdrew this past year. They, so we had a SAU of 3 towns. It's currently still 3 towns for the remainder of this year. But it will be down to 2 towns. And Nottingham does pay the lion's share, well, the biggest percentage, and we're at, I think, about 40%, I believe, is the rate that we pay into the SAU. And our estimates going forward, when it would just be Northwood and Nottingham, would be approximately 55%. So there's a big financial driver. It also has to do with, you know, basically we pay the biggest part, but we have an equal share in the say of what we do. So that's a lot of it as well, I believe.
Thank you.
How do they determine the allocation financially?
It's a formula based on the tax evaluation and student population. I think it's like I believe it's a 50-50 student population versus tax evaluation.
Thank you.
How far are you along? I mean, I remember talking about this at the school deliberation when we were going over this about this coming up for what you were talking about in the potential savings. You haven't got into those numbers yet. Because I know some of the questions were asked was how is the town piggybacking using some of the town facilities or town bookkeeping and town, people that we're paying to do our town stuff and throwing them into this equation.
Right.
Did I make that clear? Is that baffle that a little bit?
No, that's good, John. Yeah, that would be, there's potential savings that we could do, assuming that we did form our own district and that there could be some shared services between the town and the SAU. Some of it as simple as just ordering supplies and things like that. Some of it could be administrative services, potentially space. We are trying to set up a meeting with the select board to kind of, brainstorm some of those ideas. And I think that's tentatively scheduled for like August, but I'm not sure yet if it's confirmed.
I'd have to go look that up. I don't know about that. That meeting. But as we try as a town and on the select board, keep our budget, as low as possible without spending as much, this is going to put an expenditure on us. So I think our major role would be to see how much money it actually saves the people of the town, from what the expenditure it is for joining that SAU towards what's going to be without those services that they provide. And that's something you should also be aware of when looking at this, is the amount of services that we're getting from the SAU.
Right.
At the cost of how much that's going to cost for us to provide,
Right. That's all part of the study. We would definitely have to look at, and that's part of it, is figuring out, would it be a savings or not? It may actually be more expensive by a lot, and we may just say, oh, it's definitely not worth it. It may be a little bit more expensive, and we say, well, we get value there, or it may end up to be cheaper. We're hoping, hope is not a plan, but we're hoping, and we think we could do it for less, but, we don't have those facts yet. Right now it's just speculative.
When do you have a finalized plan? Is there a foresight to have this committee have, a good setup or plan to propose by town, by the vote, or by like Christmas, or?
I'm sorry, John, I lost you at the very beginning of the question.
Is there a time frame where you guys are going to know this information?
Yeah, we have to have, I think when do we have to go before the state, Kelly?
By November.
November.
By statute, we have to go by the state. So we'll have it all ready by November. And then we'll have, if it's something we want to put to the town, we'll have that all ready to present when we do our deliberative session.
So you're meeting twice a month?
Every other week, yeah.
Okay. Got a lot of work ahead of you.
We do. There is a lot of work there.
It's a lot of work.
Well, let us know what we can do to help if you need any information from us.
Right. Thanks, John.
How many people are on that subcommittee? Like what groups do they represent?
There's 7 people. Me from the budget committee, 2 from the school board, and 4 towns people at large, plus the superintendent is a non-voting member.
And that's all by statute. That's exactly the way we had to set it up.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on that?
He's muted. You're muted, Michael.
Again? Yeah, I'm just asking if Stratford's continuance in SAU 44 is through the calendar year, or if their fiscal year goes until next July, or how long are they in?
I'm pretty sure it's through their school year next year, right, Kelly?
June 30th of next year is when they will be officially out.
Okay.
So the July 1 budget will be 2 districts.
Are they paying their full freight from this point forward, or are there some services that they've already pulled out of?
So they've already pulled out of the preschool, and now we're actually sharing that 50-50 with Northwood, but they're paying their full share for everything else.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that, and this ties back to the school facilities committee's work. There is a possibility that that the school board is considering, of pulling the preschool, that we send our preschool students to Northwood to use their facility, and that's in an SAU function, that we may want to divest of that arrangement and make space for our preschool students here in the Nottingham school.
We don't have room.
Well, we're working on that. There's a plan for that.
Well, isn't that the plan for the $3 million proposal for the new addition? Sorry, not to get off topic, but we can just go back. Sorry, my bad.
We'll get there. So, John, I don't know if that was a question or a comment, but
more of a comment than a question. Just
okay. No, I'm sorry, John Decker. My rant there was more a comment than a question, perhaps. But is the SAU committee dealing with that as well?
Well, that's would be part of it, yeah, because obviously, if we pull out of the SAU, that is one of the functions that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. We couldn't have a side arrangement with Northwood to say, we want to do everything else except maybe this.
It's possible, I think, but...
Right. It's always possible to have side arrangements like that. You know, it would be basically just a contracted service back to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but a lot of the challenges with it is it's in Northwood, and it's a small space there already.
And it's primarily special ed kind of requirements for many of those students, and the SAU is doing a lot with the special ed arrangements.
And the rent is pretty high.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, thank you. Anything further for Mr. Decker? Shall I move on to the Facilities Committee report? We have been meeting, like I said, fairly frequently, particularly in recent weeks, primarily because there was a deadline for applications to be submitted to the state for getting state building aid. And that amounts to somewhere around 30% of the cost of the project. It's going to be a little less than that because there are some parts of the project that would be excluded from eligibility for the state grant money. But if you figure about 30%, you're pretty close to what the potential is there.
Michael, before you go any further, can you say what the project is?
Sure. This was something that was begun about a year and a half ago. I joined, I think about March or February of a year ago. So I've been on it from the budget committee representative standpoint for about 16 months now. It's a committee that is studying the needs of the school facility and trying to accommodate both the increase in enrollments that we've seen over the last few years and the changes of programming that the old school footprint really doesn't accommodate very well. And back in, I think, 2011, there was a warrant for the town to approve a fairly significant building addition. And the town at that time voted it down. And so we're kind of taking that forward 10 years and saying, okay, we've been trying to, I'm talking about we being the school community, and other than being a parent of students that graduated from Nottingham School 15 years ago was our last one. So I'm a little bit departed from the Nottingham School in that regard, but I've, as a budget committee member, always been supportive of it, and I've got some good contacts there from their representation to the budget committee over the years. But otherwise, when I say we, I'm talking specifically about the SAU, not the SAU, but the facilities committee. What we're trying to do is adapt to the fact that over the past decade, the school administration has done a phenomenal job of utilizing every square inch of that floor plan to accommodate the needs of a growing population with growing needs, different needs that need to be considered when trying to make sure that all the programs that are being offered have a space to be. They've maxed that out. It's time to start looking at the alternative that was failed almost a dozen years ago. And population in the school has grown, perhaps not at the rate that they anticipated when they talked about it in 2010 and 11. But we're up to, Kelly, remind me, somewhere around 525 enrollment currently in the K-8 facility. And the state standards for square footage per pupil have changed a lot over the years. And so we have a condition where all of the hallways are being utilized as classroom spaces for whatever purpose. They need to have a pull-out for some students. No place to have it in a separate room. They have to do it in the hallway, or in some cases, they've converted a janitor custodial closet into an office space because they needed to relinquish some office space to be classroom space. Kelly can speak more more directly to the specifics of what's going on there, but it's not a pretty sight in terms of how to conduct a coherent educational program in a lot of cases there. But they're doing their best, and they've done a great job of doing that so far. And they have exhausted all the potential there. So we're looking at an addition. We've employed an architect firm to do some drafts. We've had some community meetings last fall to share with them what the design ideas have been. They've gone through about 5 different iterations of design since they came on board about a year ago. And so we're looking at putting up for a bond in March for construction to begin next summer. And the state building aid application that I mentioned had a biennial deadline, which meant that if we didn't get that application in by June 30, our next opportunity would be 2 years from now. And so the need grows, time gets by, and if we miss this opportunity for state aid and have to fund it out of town dollars only, that's a big hit that shouldn't have been necessary if we didn't get that application in on time. We did get that application in on time. Some of the requirements for having that application complete were that we had a pretty firm estimate of what the project cost would be. And so that's why we had to get the architects involved early. And the state building aid process will evaluate all the applications starting beginning of, well, I guess they're starting to evaluate them now, but they'll make some decisions very early start of January, I guess, is when they start making those hard decisions about which schools get awarded a very small amount of dollars available to building capital aid. And that's why there's a 30% of project kind of limitation, so that they can at least award the amount of dollars to a few schools rather than just the one school that has displayed the best need. We're told that we have a fairly significant need, and it's we've got good prospects for getting state aid. No promises, but that's what we're hoping for. The overall cost of our project right now is looking to be about $5.9 million. That includes construction costs, and then there's some soft costs as well, like the furnishings, the fixtures, the cabinetry, the things that go into the shell of the building. We're looking at a 4 classroom addition to be put onto a space back where the back loop driveway is. So it'll be behind the existing library. We're looking at a courtyard space between the library and this new addition. There will be an end cap on both ends of the 2-story structure that'll provide 2 stories of classroom space for both of those end areas as well. So that and a little bit of space back. If you think of where the gym is and the restrooms right outside of the gym, back toward the back of the building, there will be an additional classroom added as well. So I think they said 3,900 square feet, 39,000 square feet. I'll have to look at the building aid application. to figure out exactly what it is. But anyway, it's a fairly significant addition with 4 classrooms in that new wing, in addition to the end caps and the space next to the gym, across the hallway from the gym. So we're looking at, like I say, about 5.9 million total project cost. And that's I think a plus or minus 10% cost right now is where they're figuring that to be, based on the information that's available with the kind of architectural endeavor that's been in place so far. You know, when they get closer to building, then they refine the plans, and as they refine the plans, then they are looking to be within 10% one way or the other of that 5.9. The anticipated funding sources are not just the taxpayer dollars, but they also include, we're looking at about $240,000 coming from impact fees. Over the past several years, new construction of houses in town have been assessed an impact fee for what the new house would be liable for in terms of infrastructure costs to the town, particularly the fire department and the school. And the impact fees laws require that those fees be returned to the homeowner that had to pay those fees when they built their house, or when their contractor built the house and passed those fees along to the homeowner. Those fees get returned to the homeowner if they aren't used within 5 years of the day they paid them. And so as such, that amount of dollars that are currently in that fund tends to expire some of those along the way, and then as new construction happens, more
that's not
fees
7 years instead of 5 years.
Is it 7?
I think it's actually a little longer. Yeah,
it might be. I'm remembering 5, but you're probably right. It's probably 7. Anyway, it's a finite period, and so this summer there are some fees that are evaporating from that fund, going back to the homeowner, because they have not been used for applicable school projects. But we're looking at ways to capture some of those almost to expire funds as we go forward into the coming months, so long as it meets the criteria. And then, like I say, as new construction occurs and new certificates of occupancies are issued and new fees are generated from those, that fund will increase by those amounts. So it's a little bit of a moving target. But we're looking at about $240,000 available from that source. We're also looking at about 1.7 million coming from the state aid. And like I say, that's what we're hoping for. Doesn't mean that that's what we'll get. We may or may not get our project approved by the state, but we'll know that prior to the bond vote next March. And what's left for the bond is somewhere around 3.9 million of capital expense for that bond.
The 3.9 is what the town will be voting on if all the other expenditures are met.
That's right.
Right. So this is no offense, but this is a hypothetical conversation because we're not even at that point yet.
Right.
I think for the update, Michael, as towards we continue on with the budget, because I know Tom has a nice graph that I'm looking at in the back. And I hope we don't get into a big discussion on this, as it doesn't really pertain towards our budget at this present time of what we're needing to discuss tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to
be a long, drawn-out conversation.
Pretty flat.
And I'd rather not have it tonight.
Okay. So we've
Yeah,
got
I was just trying to get an idea of what you were talking about being a new guy, so I wasn't
Well,
trying to
no,
interrupt.
I'm just trying to. This is going to be a long conversation when it comes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
okay. Yeah, I hadn't spoke to this for several months, so I thought I'd
no, it's okay.
expand on and get people caught up on what the project costs are expected to be, and the fact that the state aid is in process, and that we're hoping to get it done in the next summer if we're going to do it. The discussion on the impact fees is ongoing. The school board has been meeting with the planning board, and they will be meeting with the school board. They've had that on the schedule of the agenda for a number of meetings that hasn't happened yet with the select board. The other things is that we are next week meeting to review the applicants for a construction manager, which we'll need to get on board to refine the plans and get things to where they can get a firm cost for where we are when January comes around. Sandra, did you have anything to add that I may have missed?
I wanted to say that it's very important to know that how much detail went into the planning of that presentation, that application for the state aid. We went over that 2 and 3 and 4 different times, and making sure you went through and really went through and corrected every single typo that could possibly be there, just so that our presentation was the most effective thing that we could get to work towards saving our taxpayers. And that was a thought process that was there to make that an efficient document, to make that a realistic document. And 10% of the consideration of it, and it is usually the presentation. And I think our committee worked so hard to make it good. And that needs to be said.
Thank you. I agree. Okay, that's all we have for the subcommittee. There may be occasions when the budget committee is asked to be represented at some future committee that hasn't been developed yet, but that's what we do. On to further business. We have an election of a chair and a vice chair. I see that we have another members not with video at this point, but perhaps with audio. Would that be Joe Porter?
Hi, this is Jim Stevens that just joined.
Jim. And you are?
Hi, I invited Jim. He's got a lot of financial experience. So when I knew that we needed to appoint somebody new, I asked around and tried to find somebody with budgeting experience. So I don't want to give out his resume for him, but I think he has a lot of experience that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Jim, we've just been going through the agenda. I don't know if he shared an agenda with you, but the next few items on the agenda include election of chair and vice chair, and appointments to other standing committees for the coming year, and some other items of regular housekeeping business. But in there is to accept a resignation of the seat that we're trying to fill, and consideration of those that may be interested in filling it.
Yes, the agenda was shared
okay.
with me. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, perhaps we should move to nominate a new chair.
I think, do we have to, are we going to accept the resignation?
We can do that prior. Whoever we appoint to to fill the position won't be able to vote on anything tonight, but we can do that, or we can put that off just a bit, because I'm hoping that Joe's schedule conflict with the baseball is over and she can join us and perhaps share some of her expertise and interests as well.
Okay, well, I nominate you, Michael, for chair, since you have all the experience.
Thank you, Tom. I'm flattered, but I indicated at our last budget committee before we adjourned for March meetings or March town meetings that I would decline the nomination for chair at this time, personal reasons, and it's time for somebody else to have a turn.
I would like to nominate Tim.
Is there a second for Tim Dabrio?
I'll second that.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by John Moran that Tim Dabrio be nominated for Budget Committee Chair. Tim, here's your chance to say that you get to look forward to it or run very fast. Are there other nominations for chair? Anyone want to nominate themselves? That's also permitted. With that, if Tim Dabrio will unmute himself so he can speak to whether he would gladly accept or run very fast.
Can I do both? I would accept. Thank you.
Well, being the only nominee, any reason that we should not vote unanimously? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand in front of your camera for nominating or for electing Tim Dabrio to be chair of the budget committee for the coming year.
Should we be doing a roll call?
I think we can see.
I can relay in the audio that John, did your hand go up? John Moran, did your hand go up?
A second.
It appears to be a unanimous with an abstention by Tim Dabrio. So 9 members for, I'm sorry, 9.
Yep.
9 members for, and 1 abstain, and 1 not present.
And anyway, John Decker as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to nominate John Decker. Are there further nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, same drill. All those in favor of John Decker? John, would you like to say something on your behalf before you want to take your
Damn.
Damn. Fair enough. Okay, all those in favor of electing John Decker as vice chair to the next year's budget, this coming year's budget committee. That is 9 for, 1 abstention, and 1 not present. With that, I can continue with tonight's agenda, or I can relinquish to the new chair. It's Tim's choice.
I'll let you continue, Michael, if that's okay.
Okay, you can reconsider at any point when I mess up, okay? Thank you both. I appreciate you willing to step up and share in the glory. Appointments to standing committees. We can either do that tonight, or we can wait until we have a full slate if we want to include the new member accepting Lee's resignation.
I would
Any
move that we
preference
wait.
by the committee?
I would second that. I would move that we wait too. I think it's important for all of us to consider this, and for whoever that person is to even be considered.
Fair enough. It's been moved and seconded that we postpone the appointments to subcommittees until a following meeting, presumably the next meeting, or when we have at least to consider it at that meeting if we don't appoint someone to that remaining seat tonight.
I would think that we should continue. I would vote no for that because I think we should kind of appoint these people. We're probably not going to have another meeting for 3 months. And
so wouldn't the appointments stand the way they are until we get new people in? That was my thought in seconding it.
Well, we didn't decide that, so that's kind of one of the things we're discussing. So with the appointments, basically we always just do appointments at the beginning of the season, first meeting. We're short one person. I don't think that's going to change much.
John, tell me, John Decker, are you comfortable continuing on the SAU committee? Would you like to, John Decker, would you consider continuing in the SAU committee?
I would like to do that. I started it, so I would like to continue with that.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because I also am enjoying serving on this facilities committee, but I would relinquish it to the committee's direction, obviously, if we chose to replace me. But given that, does the committee want to say yay to
yes, Michael,
to that, or
I withdraw my second.
Withdraw your second?
I withdraw my second because I'd like to stay on as the alternate.
So, Michael, I'd say that you should stay on for the committee you're just on.
Okay, the other thing that we would be missing, if we were to wait for the next few months to appoint somebody to a subcommittee, that would be the CIP committee, unless somebody wanted to replace Mr. Decker or myself in the current roles. So with that, does it make sense to wait, or?
Well, if anybody wants to step up
somebody
on the CIP,
from this
I
crowd,
think it's great.
The easiest committee out there.
I'll do the CIP committee. It's the one that Lee was on, right?
Right.
Right. I don't mind doing that.
Perfect.
Okay, so the question then becomes, from my understanding, that since we have someone that's interested, do we want to confirm that, or do we want to wait until we have 2 more people that may be interested in being on the CIP committee?
I'd go with the confirmation.
I would agree.
Yeah, let's get it done tonight.
So let's take do we have a second to John's motion? We've got a motion on the floor too.
No,
Okay, do we have a second?
Can you restate the motion?
The motion is to postpone the appointment to subcommittees until next meeting.
And I withdrew my second.
So without
So
a second, you don't have a motion.
We don't have a motion because we don't have a second, so there's nothing
We
there.
have a second.
Okay.
Who was the second?
I say, would somebody like to second John's motion in lieu of Sandra?
All right. Well, I would like to appoint Michael to remain the school facilities committee chair with Sandra as the alternate.
I second that.
Or not chair, whatever, representative.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion? I'm comfortable with it. If Sandra's comfortable with it.
I'm comfortable.
Is the rest of the committee comfortable? All those in favor? That appears to be unanimous of the crowd here, besides Sandra and myself abstaining.
I make a motion to approve Michelle to the CIP committee.
And I'll second.
Oh, okay.
Discussion. I think she'd do a fine job. I'm happy that she endeavors to take on that role.
Roll call.
Are there any further nominations? All those in favor of Michelle? Michelle is going to be our representative to the CIP committee. Do we want to proceed in finding an alternate as well?
No, I mean, she hasn't really met, or do we need an alternate?
Well, we don't need one, but perhaps that's something that we may consider doing to give you some backup.
Okay.
But we can do that tonight or late August.
I would volunteer to be the alternate.
Perfect.
Oh, I'll second. Any further nominations for Tom LeVay to be alternate? So we have a slate. I don't know why we have to take these both in pairs, but we might as well announce one. If Michelle and Tom were to be our representative and alternative representative, respectively. All those in favor? All were in favor except for Tom abstaining. Motion carries. Thank you both. For the SAU subcommittee, is there a nomination to appoint John as our continuing representative?
I would make that nomination.
I would second that.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to make John the continuing representative of the SAU committee. Anyone make another nomination? All those in favor of John Decker being our nominee, our elected representative to the SAU committee? It's unanimous with the exception of John Decker being abstaining. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks.
Do you want to have an alternate as well, or do you want to wait until there's a
I don't know if we can have an alternate on that. And I don't think we actually need it. I'm not going anywhere. Okay. At least I have no plan to go anywhere.
There's nowhere to go right now.
Exactly.
Alrighty then. That order of business has been checked off the agenda. Thank you very much, all of you. So we are in the part where we accept the resignation of Lee Letter. She sent me an email back on May 13 indicating that she is going to be in the third year of being on the budget committee. And other than the fact that her schedule has become somewhat difficult with another obligation, exciting for her. She will not be able to attend budget committee meetings on our traditional Thursday nights with that other obligation. And I'm accepting her resignation with the blessing of the budget committee. All those in favor of accepting Lee Letter's resignation, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And raising your hand like we all have done. That motion carries 9-0. And I will instruct Lee to send a signed copy to town clerk. And our next item on the agenda would be to appoint a replacement. We can do that tonight, or we can hear from, I'm sorry, your name again?
Sorry, Jim Stevens.
Jim Stevens. Thank you very much. I'm sorry again. Jim Stevens, at least give you an opportunity to express your interest. And then we can decide as a committee whether we want to confirm your appointment tonight or wait until we've heard from other nominees, should there be any people that express interest up to the committee.
Okay, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. My name's Jim Stevens. I moved here recently, just before Christmas, from Lee. I have extensive experience in management and of construction and the total project of $1 million plus projects ranging from $1 million to $200 million in the utility sector. And I think it'd be a good fit for budget committee purposes as far as reviewing of costs, managing those costs, and making sure that we're sticking to what we need to come in. I'll use the terms I'm used to, on budget or under budget for the things that need to be done.
Do you have any municipal experience at all?
No, I do not. I do have experience on the front end of projects where we deal with a lot of municipalities in both the permitting phases and planning phases to get projects approved. So in that regard, I do have experience.
And that counts very much too, because that's a real understanding. You have to have a real understanding of how communities operate, how they budget in order to deal with them. So yes, that would make a yes to my question.
Great.
Jim, my name is Michael Keister. I've been chair this past year, and I've served on the budget committee for most of this century, essentially, since the early 2000s. And my question that I ask anybody that's expressing interest, whether it be to put their name on a ballot for this committee or to come before us to be appointed to a position for the remainder of the current year, and that is, are you typically fairly available on Thursday evenings from 6:30 to 10:30 or sometimes beyond?
Yes, I am.
It's not going to be an every Thursday, but we do get pretty thick in November, December, January.
Yes, I generally am.
Okay. The reason I say that is because when we get to a meeting where we've only got 5 people showing up and we need 6 to have a quorum, and we had some very important things to do that evening to make it happen, we need to understand that all the members recognize that this is a participatory committee and not just something to put on resumes. Typically that doesn't happen, but just checking that this is a commitment that you want to be involved with.
Oh,
and this
sure, I
is the
understand.
reasoning that Lee was having to quit.
Yeah, we had a gentleman last year that we never saw, and needed to find somebody midway through, and it was kind of tough. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm sorry you had that situation occur there. I hope just me presenting myself here today shows you that I have the interest and that I would be committed to this effort.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Other questions from the committee?
You go by Jim, not James, right?
Yep. That's correct.
Hey, nice to have somebody fresh and new that's not been in town for a while, so I'm all for him.
I would move that we appoint, since he's the only person who's came and expressed any interest. I know how you are appreciative of people that show up. I remember you had said a similar thing to me at one of the school board meetings about your problems with people being chronically absent. So
that's good you say that. So it's not just him that we're lecturing that to. That's something everybody new needs to hear.
Oh,
it's consistent messaging.
Wasn't taken personally.
Jim, a couple of the things that I want to make you aware of, just as a matter of being appointed to the committee. This appointment expires with town meeting next March. So, as do all appointments, and that's by statute. If you are having such a good time that you want to put your name on the ballot next March, and you're well received by the rest of the committee, and we'll speak on your behalf and talk up your nomination on the ballot, that would be great. So that's just the way it is. We can't appoint you to a 3-year term, but we can appoint you to the 2020, 2021 term. And the other thing I wanted to make mention of is that upon being appointed, your next step would be to get in before the town clerk at some time between now and the next meeting, and go through a swearing in before the town clerk to be on this committee.
I think they can still do that over the phone, actually.
Actually not.
No, we had to do it in person.
We had to go in person. And
that's no problem.
Anyway, sometime between now and the next meeting, or the next time you want to vote on anything before the committee, you would need to get sworn in.
So what is the process for this? Obviously Jim is here. I know Joe expressed interest. Where do we as a committee, what do we do next?
Well, we would just make a motion to approve him or to appoint him, I guess, right?
Right. And if you made that motion, I'll second it.
Okay. I motion we approve Jim, or appoint Jim, sorry.
And I'll second.
And this is, I would just say before, I'm sorry, I'm not real good with Robert's rules. Are we on to the discussion part now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just didn't want to jump out. Jim, and don't take this in any way as a criticism, but I know that Joe did run a write-in campaign and received, I don't have the votes, in front of us, but, certainly a number of votes in town. And I believe she was interested. So that's my only 2 cents to throw in there.
But she didn't show up, so I'm not sure how interested she actually is.
She wasn't able to make a meeting that she's not a member of the committee, but yeah. I see what you're saying, Tom. I'm just, she wasn't able to make the meeting tonight. She did receive a few dozen votes, or I don't know. Like I said, we don't have the numbers in front of me.
Yeah. If I might speak to that, I have had a couple email exchanges with Joe, and she indicated that she had a commitment tonight, and I told her that the alternative, if she could, would be to catch us toward the end of the meeting. I was really thinking that she might be able to do that, but I gave her that opportunity, and she also indicated in her email to me that if we chose to appoint somebody tonight, that she would understand and be accepting of that.
Sure.
And possibly if one of us had to resign mid-year, that we could count on her to come before us again. So
would it be a big deal if we put it out there to everybody else and see who showed up next meeting to give everybody an option, or is it a big deal to have someone be voted in right now? I'm just asking.
We had a person who's actually come before the meeting tonight, and I think that's not something that happens a lot, demonstrating interest in being on the budget committee. I would say we go forward with this with Jim.
Okay.
We have a motion that's been seconded. If we, as a committee, voted to to not appoint Jim, we could certainly offer that opportunity to him at the next meeting. But we do have to vote this motion before we can have another motion to delay the appointment.
Is there any more discussion now?
Move the question.
Is there any more discussion?
No, I think it's just
Okay.
he's showed up, so that counts for something in my book.
Sure.
Okay, then, all those in favor of appointing Jim to the vacancy for the budget committee meeting, or budget committee to expire in March, signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
We have 694, one against, or are those opposed? One opposed?
Again, nothing personal, Jim.
I'm taken.
Okay. So 9-4, one opposed. Welcome to our committee. You're in, Jim.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
And if I could have somebody forward the email address and contact information to John Decker, our new chair.
Tim's the new chair.
Yeah. So, John, can you find a way to make contact with Jim Stevens?
I can make contact if you want, John.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. I will get back to Joe and offer her the opportunity next time we have an opportunity. Next order of business is to accept the meeting minutes from February 6th. Now this doesn't apply for those that weren't at the meeting, either because they weren't on the committee or weren't physically at the February 6th meeting, but because of the fact that we haven't met as a committee since then, it's up to those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us to.
There were 6 of us.
6 of us. So there are. Yep. And all 6 of us were at that meeting. That would be the public hearing for the town minutes.
Yep, we were here.
Yeah. I make a motion that we accept the meeting minutes of February 6th.
A second.
Moved in second. Discussion?
Was that the deliberative session? I think that I heard that, but my audio is not so great right now.
No, the deliberative session minutes were approved by the committee. What we're looking for is the public hearing
6th?
for the town on February 6th.
Okay, so I was at that, but I wasn't at that in this capacity.
In this capacity? Yeah, okay. You'll get your chance next time. Further discussion. We've had opportunities prior to this to have our changes submitted to Lorraine and have her incorporate those into the minutes that she shared with us via email. Did everybody receive that email from Lorraine in the last couple of days? And have your chance to possibly decide you wanted to make something further? Are there amendments to the meeting minutes of February 6th? Been moved and seconded that we approve and accept the meeting minutes of February 6th. All those of the 6th of us signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. No abstentions. That motion carries 6-2. We got 3 abstentions that are voting. 4 abstentions that are voting for reasonable reasons. Okay, that motion carries. Next meeting. John, I'm going to leave discussion of that up to John Decker and talk about the purpose of that and whether 6:30 or 7 is a better time fit for going forward, and whether or not virtual and physical are things to consider.
Michael, do you mean Tim?
I meant yeah. Tim, where have you been? Zoom is moving you around on me. You were up there, now you're done. Okay. I apologize, Tim.
No apology needed.
Would you like to take on that last item in the agenda?
So I think what I'd like to do is just maybe chat with you, Michael, and possibly you, John, offline, and just figure out what we'd want to talk about if we had a meeting in August and what it would look like, just to make sure it's a good use of everybody's time, being that I know I have kids that will potentially be going back to school around that time we'd be having that meeting. And I just want to make sure if we're going to have a meeting that it's of value to everybody that's here right now. So does that sound good to everybody?
That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. We can chat offline. I'm happy to support you with whatever you need.
And in the meantime, Michael, I have a feeling that that conference you talk about in September would be more virtual than in person. And we can get everybody that information. I find it of value. So if you're able to attend that, especially as a new committee member, I highly encourage you to attend. I've been twice and always get something new out of it. So we'll find the information for that and get it out to everybody as soon as possible.
I would like to go to that too. I wasn't able to because I was working last year when it took place. Unfortunately, I'm not due to COVID, so I don't expect I will be. So that I will be available for this.
Having started halfway through the season last year, I definitely want to go. So
I would highly recommend that conference as well. Unfortunately, yeah, it probably will not be an in-person conference, and the food was fabulous last year.
Oh.
Yes, it was. They actually catered that out to somebody that wanted to make an impression on us. So it wasn't the normal sandwich line. It was good. The only comment that I have is that if we wanted to give our 2 cents on meeting time as a committee to guide the chair and vice chair's decisions on future meetings, 6:30 or 7 or whatever better time. Perhaps Tim might want to get our feedback on that tonight for going forward, but that's up to him.
I think 6:30 works well because meetings tend to go late. And so the 6:30 seems to be doable. We've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, 6:30 works for me tonight, so that would be my 2 cents.
6:30 works for me too.
I'm good with it.
I'm fine.
Yep, 6:30 is good.
I'm good with it as well, unless we start going back to work where it may get a little tough.
Jim, although you're not a voting member on this meeting, certainly your feedback is important to this as well.
I appreciate that. Later with anything is generally better for me, but we'll go with the group.
Very well. So Tim takes it from here going forward. I thank everybody for your constructive use of our time tonight. We've really had a lot to cover, and we've done it pretty well given the circumstances. I really appreciate it.
And a real vote of appreciation for all the work that Mike has done over the years. I know he's still part of us, but he's been chair on and off, and he's done a fabulous job this last year. And I just want to say that.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you.
I agree.
I'll sure do what I can to get Tim a running start.
I appreciate that. So I'll get the easiest part of the meeting is, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Third.
All in favor?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.